Welcome to another episode of David Rides a Trike. I'm David. I'm riding a trike. And today is June 7th, 2020. And June 7th is a big day for me. Today is the 23rd anniversary of my pancreas transplant. That meant that I was no longer a diabetic. It's also a day that's filled with a lot of sadness for me because my pancreas donor was a 17-year-old girl named Kristen Frank who lost her life in a car accident. Her parents and family were kind enough to donate her organs, and I was one of the recipients receiving her pancreas. So it's always a day with very mixed emotions for me. I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 1.5 years old, and in 1986, I had a kidney transplant. My kidneys had failed as a result of long-term diabetes. One of the drugs I was put on as an anti-rejection drug after that transplant was prednisone. Prednisone can wreak havoc with blood sugar levels, and it did with mine. I got to the point where I could no longer tell when my blood sugar was high or low. I could through a test. Now bear in mind that 1986 was right around the time when home blood glucose testing first became available. Up until that point, it was a matter of going to the doctor's office and having them do it there. But my blood sugars could go from too low to read to too high to read in a matter of minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And I had lost the sense of low blood sugars at that point in my life because I had experienced it so many times. Consequently, there were a lot of times I was very disoriented, didn't know where I was, and didn't realize it was because my blood sugar was low. It was getting to the point where just day-to-day life was very, very difficult for me. So I called my transplant coordinator and I said, is there anything that can be done at this point? And she said, well, you're actually an ideal candidate for a pancreas transplant. And I jumped at the opportunity. So we went through all the physical workup. I was in, other than the diabetes and what it was doing, I was in good shape. And I was put on the list for a pancreas. They said it would take about 6 months, most likely, until I received a pancreas. And it was almost exactly 6 months. I got the phone call June 7th. It was a Saturday, 1997, about 7 a.m. And they said, we have a pancreas for you. And I got very excited. And then they said the donor was a 17-year-old girl who lost her life in a car crash. And I could feel my stomach just drop. I had never put any thought into the fact that whoever ended up being my donor was going to be someone who lost their life, let alone a 17-year-old girl. They told us to, my transplant center then was the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. They said, you know, come on up here, and we flew to the airport, got on a flight, was actually in the hospital, walked in the door at 10:30 a.m. that morning. When we got there, Debbie went into the gift shop. She said she wanted to get a newspaper, and she came out looking at it, and she said, oh my God, I think your donor is on the front page of the paper. It's the story of a car crash that took place. And I said, I don't want to see it. I can't even look at it. And it took me close to a year to actually look at that newspaper, which I still have, by the way. Anyhow, I laid around all day waiting and waiting and waiting, and about 9:30 that night, they finally took me in for surgery. And when they brought me into the OR, the doctor was sitting at a table leaning over an aluminum tray, and she said, oh my God, this is the most beautiful pancreas I've ever seen. Do you want to see it? And I said, no, I can't. You know, I just kept thinking of the beautiful person and the wonderful family who said yes to organ donation to make this possible. So they did the transplant. It was successful. It got a canoer going by.
Is that cool? Isn't that cool?
Yeah. The transplant was a success. I had some problems afterwards because to make a long story short, they ended up leaving the end of a
little bit quieter today on the water. There's not as much chop.
Staple gun. They actually staple the output, one of the outputs of the pancreas was stapled to my bladder. And in the process of doing that, a piece of the staple gun fell off, a big piece. So I kept getting severe urinary tract infections, but once they figured that out, they went in and got that out. But here I am, 23 years later, and I am no longer a diabetic. And like I said, this is a day I celebrate, but I'm also always very sad because of the loss of Chrissy's life. I don't know if you could see, hang on a sec, but I am wearing my I'm Riding with Chrissy shirt that I wear every year when I ride on this day. I also ride it during the American Diabetes Association's Tour de Cure, because that was my cure for diabetes. And I like to acknowledge Chrissy and her family for their wonderful decision to donate Chrissy's organs. So that's it for today's episode. Please, if you could push, prod, or poke those subscribe, like, and the little buttons and the little bell down below. The bell will let you know when I've published another video. I would greatly appreciate it. And until the next video, thanks for watching. See you later. Bye.